Have you heard the media fawn all over Capitol Hill's latest immigration plan? Well, it's being billed as a bipartisan approach, which is a complete joke, since its sponsors are amnesty zealot John McCain of Arizona and liberal Delaware Senator Chris Coons. This bill is basically a rerun of the failed Gang of Eight fiasco that flopped out back in 2013. Remember, that legislation was so unpopular that even its original sponsor, Marco Rubio, had to walk it back, and now he considers it a big mistake. So Gang of Eight 2.0 would grant legal status and a path to citizenship to young migrants who came here before 2014. And that is a number that far exceeds the 1.8 million that President Trump was willing to make citizens in his compromise gesture. And there would be no border wall funding, and it would keep chain migration. That entire scam would keep going. So obviously, this is a complete non-starter for the White House, meaning McCain-Coons was a stupid ploy, not a serious plan. Lawmakers who have been shopping various amnesties for years focus most of their empathy and concern on illegal immigrants who fear deportation, not on Americans whose lives have been devastated by illegal immigrant crime. President Trump, however, hasn't forgotten those people, and today he focused on closing immigration loopholes to keep groups like MS-13 out of our country. As for the Democrats refusing to come to the table, Trump's willing to play hardball.
If we don't change the legislation, if we don't get rid of these loopholes where killers are allowed to come into our country and continue to kill gang members, and we're just talking about MS-13, there are many gang members that we don't even mention. If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country. I'd love to see a shutdown if we don't get this stuff taken care of.
That left is going crazy because he said that. But that's how much he cares about the country. He cares about our safety, the rule of law. The president knows that the people are with him on this issue. When you look at the poll numbers, Americans want sensible immigration reforms along with maybe curing the DACA problem. Okay. Here's a recent Harvard-Harris poll. It found that 65% of voters agreed that any bill granting legal status to Dreamers should be accompanied by funding for a wall, an end to chain migration, as well as an end to the visa lottery system. 53% supported building a border wall consisting of physical and electronic barriers. And a whopping 79% wanted immigration to be based on merit, not on family connections or other factors. Well, I'm assuming neither senator from Arizona bothered to consider the new comprehensive study by economist John Lott, who will join us later in the show. Professor Lott basically looked at all the illegals who entered the Arizona state prison system from the years 1985 through 2017. That's 33 years of data. And what did he find? He says illegals were at least 142% more likely to be convicted of a crime than other Arizonans. He found their sentences were 10.5% longer than U.S. citizens due to the severity of their crimes. He found that illegals were 163% more likely to be convicted of first-degree murder than U.S. citizens, 168% more likely to be convicted of second-degree murder, 189.6% more likely to be convicted of manslaughter. Illegals were much more likely to commit sexual offenses against minors, sexual assault, DUI, and armed robbery. And 45.4% of illegal immigrants were more likely than other criminals to have been gang members. My goodness. Here's a smattering of how just in the past week, illegals have added to the health and well-being of their communities. On Monday, in Hartford, Connecticut, where I come from, Onel Arana Garacio, a Mexican illegal, pled guilty to being part of a heroin ring that extended to Alabama, in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Ohio, and guess what? He's a boomerang visitor. He was already deported back in 2013. Then there's this charmer, Salvador Gomez Lopez of Montgomery County, Maryland, right nearby where I'm broadcasting from. The Salvadoran illegal was urinating in public, lovely, when a bystander tried to convince him to pull up his pants and find a bathroom. Instead, Gomez pulled a box cutter out and started slashing at the poor man's throat. There's a lot of gashes there now. Last week, 3 Dreamers were arrested in 3 different smuggling cases. All were DACA recipients. They were smuggling human beings. 2 were nabbed in California and 1 in Arizona. And this is a heartbreaker. 5 days ago in Rio Vista, Texas, a young mother of 2, Jennifer Smith, on her way to pick up her kids at school, was killed in a horrific car crash by illegal immigrant Candido Martinez Ramirez, 32 years old. He was drunk. And this past Sunday, many of you have heard, Indiana Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson and his Uber driver were killed by an illegal, intoxicated alien. 37-year-old Manuel Orrego Salvala, the DOJ announcing in just the last hour that they will bring federal charges against the Guatemalan, proving once again that Jeff Sessions, his attorney general, and his DOJ are moving quickly to right the wrongs of the past when it comes to illegal crime going unpunished. No more. Sessions is right. This has to stop. Look at these cases. This is just a few. It's just the last week. Could do a whole show on this. When you really start to think about it, it's total insanity. We have enough problems in our country with drugs, the opioid epidemic, alcohol, criminal activity. We sure do not need any more. And yes, of course, all illegal immigrants are not criminals, but frankly, that's not the point. Because that's of little comfort to Jennifer Smith's sons, or Edwin Jackson's mother, or the thousands of Americans whose names you do not know, whose lives will never be the same again because our government was unwilling or unable to enforce our laws. And that's the angle. We have with us tonight someone who has suffered terribly because of illegal immigrant crime. Sergeant Brandon Mendoza was a 13-year veteran of the Mesa Police Department in Arizona. On May 12, 2014, he was hit head-on and killed by a drunk driver heading the wrong way on a freeway. The driver had been in the country illegally for more than 20 years. Sergeant Mendoza's mother, Marianne, joins us now in the studio. It is great to see you. Thank you for being here. We've talked a couple of times over the years because of your testimony about your son and what he represents, his story, kind of man he was. And I'm so impressed with your poise and your dedication to continuing his memory and maybe help us learn something here. You heard what I said in the monologue. What is your reaction?
I'm very disappointed in the senators, that represent Arizona to begin with. They've had this type of information readily available, and they choose to ignore it, and they choose to act like Arizona does not have a problem, and we have a huge problem. And I thank you so much for bringing attention to so many of the deaths that have happened in the last couple weeks. This happens so much. More people are killed yearly by illegal aliens in the United States than were killed on 9/11. And this is what people don't understand. It's a slow, methodical, continual thing all year long.
And when you think about the critics of President Trump for bringing this issue to light, they say, well, you're painting with a broad brush. Not all illegal immigrants commit these types of crime. They're people just coming here to have a better life. What do you say?
That's true. But, a lot of these people who killed our children came here for a better life, and something happened. And the politicians in Washington right now, they're the very ones who are giving this monster a voice and letting these illegals think that they have a right to demand what they're demanding from our politicians. They have no place in American politics. None.
And does it elicit a strong reaction from you? I imagine it does, when you see the American media so heavily invested in covering the stories of illegal immigrants who fear deportation. I mean, almost every day. I mean, on radio, we call them immigration sob stories. Yet your story, the stories of so many other mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters like you, without President Trump and maybe talk radio, maybe Fox, I don't know where they get a voice.
We don't, and that's the unfortunate thing, because the liberal media and most publications in the United States only publish those type of stories. It tries to evoke, sympathy to fit their agenda.
Do you not deserve sympathy?
Absolutely, 100%. I'm more angry now than wanting sympathy, because I feel for my fellow Americans who are in the future are going to be affected by illegal alien crime. And that's what each and every one of us at AVAX stand up for. That's why we're fighting the fight we fight. We don't want this to happen to another family. And I put a message out to the politicians, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. Which child of yours would you look in the eye and decide that they're the ones who you give up to an illegal alien criminal to support the agenda that you're supporting?
I mean, it sounds harsh to say that, but it does seem
that's what they had us do.
They are willing to say, well, this is just going to be the price that we have to pay.
Collateral damage.
In order to be a welcoming, open country, the Statue of Liberty, bringing me tired, you're poor. I mean, it's almost like that's where we are, because they turn their head away from your story.
Right.
And so many others like you. And Arizona, this is what drives me crazy. John McCain, God bless him, I know he's suffering with cancer, and it's a horrible thing. But John McCain is coming back for another bite at the apple, pushing this huge amnesty, no border wall.
Right.
No end to chain migration. I don't think real change of visa lottery that it's significant. Jeff Flake, who's very unpopular in your state, he's retiring because he's so unpopular. Another big pro-illegal immigrant senator. And yet Arizona is ground zero for illegal immigration. I don't understand. And so many people I meet say, how are these guys representing us? How are they representing? I mean, it's stunning to me.
It's a lasting impression that Jeff Flake's going to give, the type of legislation that he's going for. And unfortunately, the same with John McCain. But the thing is, this has been a problem for 20 or 30 years in Washington. The immigration problem cannot be fixed. The illegal alien problem cannot be fixed until they start at the beginning and get rid of the criminals, secure our borders. They come back over repeatedly. You can't fix DACA and Dreamers without having a hand on what's happening with all the criminals in our country. You have to get rid of them, and you have to protect Americans. We need to come first.
Marianne, thank you so much for joining us. And we will not forget your son, Brandon. Thank you so much. And the man who compiled the most comprehensive look at illegal immigrants and crime has come under fire by open border advocates. Here to defend his study is John Lott of the Crime Prevention Research Center, along with immigration attorney Alan Orr. Professor Lott, let's start with you, because you've been doing a lot of research over the years about different topics, guns and violent crime, and now you focused on Arizona. And you heard Marianne Mendoza, who will always be a grieving mother, who's turning her sadness into righteous anger, impatient for results. But your study looked at 33 years of statistics. Tell me about your methodology, because it's coming under assault.
Right. Well, there have been a lot of studies that have been done on illegal immigrants and crime. The problem has been the data with those have relied either on survey data, which is pretty problematic if you're going to be asking somebody whether they're here illegally and whether they have a past criminal history, or they've mixed together pretty much completely both legal and illegal immigrants. And I believe the data for Arizona shows that illegal immigrants are much more likely to commit crime, but legal immigrants tend to be very law-abiding. And if you mix the two together, you're going to miss a lot of that difference. The nice thing about Arizona's data is that they've done by far the best job that I've seen in terms of separating out those different groups. And what you find is that, as you mentioned, that they're much more likely to commit crime.
I find to be outrageous.
They make about 12% of the state prison population, where illegal immigrants make about 4.8% of the state population. That's particularly imbalanced when you look at young criminals. Those under 35, illegal immigrants make about 8% of the prison population, but only 2% of the state population.
All right, let's go to Alan. Alan, you have concerns about this study. We'll put up the graphic in a moment. But you find it to be...
I can't hear anything, guys.
I lost the signal here.
Well, I think we might be having an issue with this. But let's put up the full graphic of what we learned from John Lott's study, because I think the Fox viewers need to see this. Here it is. 142% more likely to be convicted of a crime, illegal immigrants in Arizona. They tend to commit more serious crimes. They serve 10.5% longer sentences, more likely to be classified as dangerous, 45% more likely to be gang members, than U.S. citizens. Marianne, we're going to try to get our sound back on our guests, but I don't find this surprising at all. And John Lott's getting hammered out there because he looked at the data and he came up with a way of analyzing it to try to separate out green card holders who are legally here and illegal immigrants. And my question, and you must have some thoughts on this, how is this not already readily available? Why do we need a professor of economics to have to go into the database for 33 years in Arizona? Why don't we know these facts?
Well, and
it's like they're being purposely kept from the American people. This drives me crazy. I'm always trying to find out the status of these people committing crimes. Like, oh, we can't report that. What?
We have somebody in Oregon who is able to get us those kind of statistics, too. And this was the first report from any other state than Oregon that was able to do this. And we thank them.
Yeah, it's about time. I think we have Professor Lott and Alan back with us. Alan, let's go to you. You have some concerns about John Lott's study. And by the way, John, I thought you were just talking over me earlier. I'm like, God, he doesn't even hear what I'm saying. So, forgive the audio. This is live TV. Alan, let's talk to you about the methodology without getting too wonky. He paints a picture of illegal immigrants more likely to commit violent crime, more likely to be incarcerated for these crimes, murder, manslaughter, first degree, second degree. Why do you dispute this?
Well, it's easily disputed because the methodology just doesn't work. It's inconsistent with every other study that's been performed over the last couple of decades, as well as data from the American Immigration Association, as well as the Immigration Council, which shows that immigrants actually do less crime.
And
the types of crimes.
Immigration, though, right?
Well,
those groups
also,
are all pro-immigration.
Well, I don't think they're necessarily pro-immigration. They're pro-American. But also, Cato Institute has also gone after the site for sort of saying that there's statistical data information. So, I mean, it's not. Cato
Institute? You got to be kidding me. Alan, you got to do better than Cato. Cato is notoriously open borders. I mean, they dine out on China trade and open borders, okay?
Well, we're not talking about
they're good
just
on taxes. They're terrible on the other two issues.
We're not talking about just open borders. We're talking about actual information here. And John, there's no way for John to actually have the data to show who was an undocumented and who was a legal immigrant. His data is really skewed information from over a large time period, which just dumps Americans, naturalized citizens, as well as people who were here on a green card who were in these removal proceedings, which make the numbers hyper.
All right, John, respond quickly to that criticism, please.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of points they just brought up. What I was trying to say earlier is that there are a lot of studies that have been done, but the problem is that those studies completely mix together legal and illegal immigrants, or they do surveys. Well, in the case of Arizona, you have pre-sentencing reports that are done that determines whether or not what their citizenship status is. That's included in the data that's here. Now, you know, there may be some issues that one can say that they may have made mistakes in some cases, but even if you believe that's the case, and I doubt that, the most you're talking about is about 10% of the sample that's there. And that's very small. That's a much smaller error than any of the other data that you've been pointing to.
All right, guys, fascinating. We're going to continue to debate this, no doubt. I think we need more transparency, more reporting, more truth. And the localities, the state should have to reveal and keep a database on who is committing the crime in the United States, the American people. I think demand to know. Marianne, I know you do. And still ahead, a second bombshell memo. You're not going to believe this. This time pointing to actual coordination between that shady Oppo firm, Fusion GPS, and Obama and Clinton pals. Seriously, you cannot make this up. It gets better every night. Joe DeGeneva, Intel operative Christopher Steele, and this is great, the Obama State Department and, dun-dun-dun, Clinton allies. Joining us now to analyze this breaking development, former U.S. Attorney Joe DeGeneva and Kimberly Strassel, a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Joe, you've been saying for some time there could be criminal implication here for some of these major players at the FBI. What do we know now after this new memo has been redacted, unredacted?
The Grassley-Graham memo and letter establishes beyond any doubt that the FBI knowingly deceived the FISA court about the information that it was presenting to them, lied to them about the fact that it was verified information, which it was not, which the law requires. And now we know that additional Clinton allies, including Sidney Blumenthal, were involved in the transmission of false information, unverified information, to the FBI through State Department officials. somebody's going to have to go to prison.
Kimberly Strassel, we've been led to believe that any omission in the application for the FISA warrant was inadvertent or it was minor. There was a footnote referencing political influence. But I think the FISA judge might have had a different view had we known that some of the information had come from, I don't know, Sid Blumenthal, who knows, maybe Cody Shearer, these old Clintonistas. This is wild what we learned tonight.
Well, that's obviously one of the most obnoxious parts of this, is finding out that, they did not, and this memo goes to this, the Grassley memo makes far more clear exactly what the FBI told the FISA court. And we know that they did not say that it was the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC. We now know the language. In fact, it was told that it was a law firm that was connected and had political motivations, which, of course, is the most anodyne thing you could tell the court, and was clearly deliberately done in order to keep the dossier's credibility. But I think the other part is what the FBI told the court, which turns out not to be true, which is they submit the dossier and this Yahoo News article as the basis of their investigation, and they say that one corroborates the other, and then they specifically tell the court that they do not believe Michael Steele is behind that Yahoo article. Well, we knew he was, and you have to assume that if they knew anything about what they were doing, had even the slightest investigative chops, they would know he did it as well, too. So that's a question that needs to be asked of the FBI.
Yeah, they all have to come back in for questioning, every single one of them. I want to put up a full screen of what's in this memo. This is a key part, and Joe, I'd like you to respond. And it relates to how they got this information. Okay, there is substantial evidence suggesting that Mr. Steele materially misled the FBI about a key aspect of his dossier efforts, one which bears on his credibility. Before that, then it says it's troubling enough that the Clinton campaign funded Mr. Steele's work, but that these Clinton associates were contemporaneously feeding Mr. Steele allegations raises additional concerns about his credibility. And you file this FISA application with the court, Joe, and you know that Christopher Steele has been talking to the press, which they knew in the subsequent applications. Yet they never told the court, we've learned this, that he is unreliable, we've terminated our relationship with him. What does that mean for a lawyer to okay an application and to sign off on an application, knowing that this guy, Steele, was really problematic?
There is now no doubt whatsoever that the lawyers at the FBI and the lawyers at the Justice Department deceived the FISA court knowingly. They had every reason in the world to believe that the information being provided was not only biased, but completely unreliable. They didn't care. They wanted the wiretaps, the intercepts, and the electronic surveillance because this was part of a plan. And the plan was to exonerate Hillary Clinton, and if she lost the election, to frame Donald Trump and his associates with a false crime. And they almost succeeded. And if she had won, they would have succeeded.
Oh, my gosh, but this went up to June of 2017.
That is correct.
The surveillance of Carter Page goes up to 20.
It is remarkable. This is McCabe.
This is outrageous.
McCabe ruled the FBI functionally with an iron fist. And if you crossed him, you know what happened? Your career was over. And it was known inside the Bureau. By the way, everybody keeps saying, how come nobody in the FBI or the DOJ stood up? Interestingly, all the lawyers kept their mouths shut.
They're all afraid of McCabe.
The one person who spoke up was a military man, Admiral Mike Rogers. He's the hero in this story. But McCabe and all these people knowingly lied to the FISA court.
Kimberly, Jeff Sessions today said that, is going to have a fresh start at the FBI. It's a little late for a fresh start. I mean, this is really bad. But, it's nice. But, what's next, essentially?
Well, look, I think one of the problems here, and I'm not suggesting a firing or anything, but I think that there was a mistake maybe made when the Trump team decided to name, Christopher Wray as the new FBI director. Because when you have a level of mess this large, the only way you get a fresh start is to have someone come in from outside that whole realm with a new set of eyes and just get rid of clean house. And, the thing is Christopher Wray was not part of this. I want want to make clear, and I think he is making some changes. Look, he's moved or fired or got rid of a whole bunch of the people that were surrounding Comey. McCabe, the chief of staff, Rubicki, the general counsel, Baker. But, you know, it brings up the question, as someone who spent so many years around the Justice Department and involved in this realm, is that the kind of outsider you need to really, start things over?
Someone's got to pay for what happened here. Carter Page has been completely, in my view, unfairly dragged through the mud, surveilled. They read his email going back as long as they want to. This is lovely. But, so he's been put through the ringer just to get at Trump, and they falsified this information. This stuff was phony baloney that went to the FISA court. They knew this guy was a complete fraud, and they went with it anyway. That's as simple as it gets. Joe and Kimberly, such a great segment. Great insight tonight. And we're not done, though, in law enforcement all across this country. Now it's like the FBI can do no wrong. As long as the ultimate goal is the removal of Donald Trump, you can never question them. If you do question them, you're the bad guy. What has it been like for you personally to be at the center of this? Because you've been in this meat grinder in the media. I'm kind of used to it, but you really got thrown into it as the House Intel Committee chair.
Well, the good thing is that knowing what happened earlier last year when we exposed the unmaskings that had occurred and watching how they operated during that time period, I knew as we kept building up to this, by all the same people who were attacking me, that we had the story nailed, that we were 100% right. And so it made it easy. So, I said the other night that it's actually enjoyable because you just know that you've got the story.
I always like it when the critics come after you. I always wear it as a badge of honor, especially certain critics like this. Watch.
Is it possible that the Republican chairman of the House Intel Committee has been compromised by the Russians? Is it possible that they actually have a Russian agent running the House Intel Committee on the Republican side?
I hope that's not the case, and I certainly have no information to suggest that it is. I think that
doesn't his behavior speak of that, though? I mean, I'm not the first person who's raised this.
Mark Halperin's former writing buddy. So what about these outrageous allegations? Because you're getting hotter and hotter and hotter to the truth. You're getting closer and closer and closer.
Right.
And they're turning up the heat on you as you're getting closer to the truth about what happened.
And it's scary that people actually would watch that and then believe it. Right? I mean, we've been Republicans for a long time, especially on the House Intelligence Committee. We were begging the Obama administration to do something about the Russia problem, and they ignored us. I even said it was the largest intelligence failure since 9/11, our failure to understand Putin. And yet the mainstream media doesn't care. You would think they would actually call out some of these guys who say this stuff, but they don't. The facts don't get in the way, because I just think they do not want this president to be successful, and they don't want Republicans to be successful, and they have one goal in mind, and that is power. They just want Republicans removed from the House of Representatives.
By any means necessary?
By any means. I mean, look what they did. I mean, it really appears like with political dirt being moved from a campaign, being developed and paid for by a campaign, funneled right into the FBI to open up an investigation into the other campaign, into the Trump campaign, and then to spy on someone is something I would never have imagined. This is where I knew about a year ago, about last March time frame, that the dossier was used in some form or fashion. But even at that time, I thought to myself, really, they
has to be a minor thing.
Couldn't have been that crazy, and it ends up they were really that crazy.
What about bringing back Comey, McCabe, perhaps members of the State Department, of what we learned tonight, and their involvement in filing for this FISA application, knowing what they knew about Christopher Steele, even in the subsequent applications? He was unreliable. He had basically admitted as such that he was getting subsourced information, including from throughout the process through Clinton Associates. Are you going to bring people back?
Yeah. So phase one of the investigation was FISA abuse. Okay, and we closed that out in terms of what we think members needed to know. We're moving on to the State Department and irregularities there. The next phase will be looking at all the cast of characters and then conducting those interviews.
State Department thus far, what can you tell us?
I can just tell you that the State Department was gathering information and then passing it to very strange places that should not have happened.
The Obama State Department.
The Obama State Department. I will just say that there were comments over the weekend from people within the State Department that said John Kerry had been briefed on the dossier, that they had provided the new dossier, whatever this new dossier is, and they had provided it also to the FBI. So by people starting to talk about it, it seems to me like some people may be trying to distance themselves from the rest of the cast of characters.
Sidney Blumenthal, longtime Clinton confidant, he was trying to push Hillary in emails to, policy to dump Gaddafi. He had a lot of stuff going on in Libya himself. Cody Shearer, who is a longtime Clinton, hack, who goes way back to the mid-'90s when I was, covering all this stuff back then. There's a sense that those two were involved in putting information out there that got in the hands of Christopher Steele. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I will have to tell you that we've read a lot of the stories, but you have to wait until we decide how we're going to proceed with the investigation. I mean, there's several people involved.
Adam Schiff got punked. I think we have the call. I want to play it.
She got compromising materials on Trump after their short relations.
Okay. And what's the nature of the compromise?
Well, there were pictures of naked Trump.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so Putin was made aware of the availability of the compromising material?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will be back in touch with you through our staff to make arrangements to obtain these materials for our committee and for the FBI, and I appreciate you reaching out to us.
Congressman, it is not a good accent, Russian accent. I've lived there. It's not it's a bad accent. This is really funny. But
well, I think it's pretty clear now. You have the Clinton campaign who was getting information from the Russians, dirt on Trump, and now you know that the House Intelligence Committee Democrats were getting dirt, or attempting to get dirt from Russians on Trump.
Well, he's like taking a random phone call of someone, like, hey, whatever you got, bring it to me.
Well, yeah, I can remember that way back, many of the Democrats on the committee have said that they have more than circumstantial evidence that there was collusion between Trump and the Russians. Maybe that was it.
Oh. You're very funny. Very funny. Who said Devin Nunes is not funny? He's a straight man, though. He delivers it straight. Thanks for being with us. It's always great to see you.
Thank you.
And by the way, dangerous illegal immigrant crime. We talked about at the top of the Jones. Sheriff Jones, this is a wild story. Heroin popping up all across the United States. A lot of it now coming in from Mexico, being sold by illegal immigrants. Tell us what you know.
Basically, this is about the fourth big bust that we had. They had thousands of hits of heroin, cocaine, guns. Half of the suspects are illegals. They've been here illegally. The other ones are on the loose. A couple of them are on the loose. Thousands of dollars. And this is just one of four. We had a guy from the Ukraine the other day, had 120 guns in his house, 10 guns in his car, and he was legally in this country. But then we had 4 others that were arrested, the same thing, guns, drugs, and from Mexico. And we're the 8th largest county in Ohio. We're not the largest, but we're the 8th largest. And we're in a major hub, and it's destroying our community. We have over 200 are going to die this year with heroin overdoses. We've had babies born in our jail. The last one was born in the toilet, all addicted to heroin that's coming from Mexico. And it's destroying us. While the government fights in D.C. over the issues you were talking about earlier, they don't give us the resources we need. We wish that the Congress, the Democrats and the Republicans would get together and come down here and help us in law enforcement. We need their help. We need their support. We don't need this bickering. If they think the people in our communities care about their bickering and fighting, we care about our taxes, we care about our health care, and we care about safety. And when you have someone from another country that has over 120 guns in their house in one county and the guns, one of them was a silencer. They had better quality guns than what our law enforcement has.
So that guy was Ukrainian?
Rifles.
That guy was Ukrainian?
Yes, Ukrainian. Yes, born in the Ukraine. And this is just one of many. And you wonder why Ohio, we're on a major highway. We've had MS-13 And people that think they're not here, they're fools. They're here. But we need help from our government. We need our government to come in and do some workplace enforcement. We need to send a message.
Sheriff, who except Trump has really made this issue as big as it is front and center? I mean, if it weren't for President Trump,
no one
I don't know who else would.
We'd have nothing. We have a real poor governor here, Governor Kasich, who encourages all these people to come into the state of Ohio.
A few of us were meeting with President Reagan. He shook my hand and offered just a little bit of advice. He said, make it matter.
I would shut it down over this issue.
We had one Trump shutdown. Nobody wants another, maybe except him.
The standoff over immigration puts the U.S. government on the verge of another shutdown. Peter Doocy is following the latest. Today, President Trump's deciding what to do with the Democrats' response to the GOP memo alleging abuses of the government surveillance system. Details on the president's surprising meeting with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Plus, top Republicans accuse the FBI of blocking details about the author of the so-called dirty dossier. Ed Henry is digging deeper. And analysis from Tom Dupree, a former top Justice Department official under President Bush. Then a follow-up on the shocking death of Indianapolis Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson. New questions about the accused drunk driver and his history of deportations, reigniting a heated immigration debate. It's must-see reaction from Indiana Congressman Todd Rokita, live in a Fox News at Night exclusive.
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Earlier today, the House was moving to vote on a stopgap spending bill, a group of bipartisan senators discussing immigration, but the president then threw a grenade into the mix.
If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country. I'd love to see a shutdown if we don't get this stuff taken care of.
Fox team coverage tonight. Ed Henry bringing us the latest on memo mania. But first, let's go to Peter Doocy reporting on the looming shutdown just 2 days away. The government runs out of money. What then, Peter?
Well, for months, House Democrats have had tomorrow circled on the calendar as the day they would take a 2-hour bus trip to a resort in Maryland for a retreat. But that retreat has been canceled because a government shutdown is still a possibility. A few hours ago, the House passed its spending bill, but House leaders stuffed some extra Pentagon funding into the package so it would have enough votes, and that creates a problem in the Senate, which Speaker of the House Paul Ryan sees coming. He wrote this, quote, "Now I urge the Senate Democrats to end their filibuster so we can finally provide funding for our men and women in uniform. No more games. The safety of our service members and the security of our nation are at stake." So now the two chambers are at odds, and the focus has shifted almost entirely to keeping the government open for a month and eliminating certain limits on federal spending.
We're making real progress on a spending deal that would increase the caps for both military and middle-class priorities on the domestic side that Democrats have been fighting for.
Notice not much talk about DACA so far, even though Democrats only agreed to help end the last shutdown last month because they thought there was going to be a DACA deal by this coming Thursday. The White House Chief of Staff John Kelly has been on Capitol Hill negotiating for the president, and he's been telling Democratic counterparts that if they approve funding for a border wall, limits to chain migration, and an end to the visa lottery, the Trump administration will pave a path to citizenship for 1.8 million DACA recipients and those who were eligible but never got around to applying.
I got to say that some of them just should have probably gotten off the couch and signed up. But that doesn't really matter now because President Trump has given them the status.
Well, that line didn't sit well with Democrats who argue that it's not a big secret among immigrant communities why not everybody wants to out themselves as illegal.
They're afraid. They're afraid. Does he need evidence about why they should be afraid? He should look at the people in his own office and what they say about these people.
Today, President Trump did say that he'd love to see a shutdown if immigration problems are not solved. But his press secretary, Sarah Sanders, later explained that the White House won when Democrats shut down the government over DACA last time, and the White House would win again if it happens again. But it is not something that the president is pushing for.
Well, we'll know in a couple of days, and I know you'll stay on it.
I will.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Good to see you. All right, another wild day on Wall Street after plunging early this morning. The markets eventually recovered ending the day with a 567-point gain. That recoups about half of the nosedive the Dow took yesterday. Just minutes from now, we'll take a look at what's behind the volatility and how a potential shutdown could impact the markets. Brian Brenberg, the chair of the program in business and finance at the King's College, will join us live. Well, breaking tonight, new allegations involving the dirty dossier and how much the FBI may have relied on that when getting those FISA surveillance warrants. Brand new developments on that front as President Trump met today with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. They went over the differences between a Republican memo that claims the FBI abused its spy powers and a Democrat memo that counters that narrative. This just days after President Trump refused to rule out firing the Deputy Attorney General. Ed Henry has more on today's meeting and tonight's breaking news. Hey, Ed.
Well, Shannon, great to see you. Just breaking tonight, we're getting our hands on a less redacted version of that criminal referral that Republican Senator Chuck Grassley sent to the Justice Department last month about former British spy Christopher Steele. And it gives us even more information showing that the FBI relied heavily on Steele's first dossier to get a FISA warrant. Plus, the FBI repeatedly represented to the FISA court that Steele did not have unauthorized contacts with media outlets like Yahoo News and Mother Jones, and that was simply not true. That's why Grassley is trying to see whether or not he broke the law, Christopher Steele, by lying to the FBI. Also new tonight, the clock now officially ticking. The president has the Democrats' memo in his hands, so he'll decide whether to block some or all of this memo in the next 5 days. The president met late this afternoon, as you mentioned, with the Deputy Attorney General to begin the process of reviewing the differences between the Republican and Democrats' memos and figure out how much sensitive information should be redacted. The fact that the president is working with Rosenstein shows Democrats like Congressman Adam Schiff have been exaggerating and trying to fan flames of chaos by charging the president was going to fire Rosenstein and spark a constitutional crisis because of the Deputy Attorney General's appearance in the Republican memo. As for the Democrats' memo, a source who has seen it and read it believes a trap has sort of been set for the president politically because the Democrats' memo is filled with sources and methods within the intelligence community. A potentially tactical move by Democrats to force the commander-in-chief to either stop release of their memo or make major redactions and look like he's not being transparent, as the New York Times is pushing the secretive FISA court to unseal the underlying documents that led to surveillance of former Trump advisor Carter Page. He's speaking out, first in an exclusive with our own Laura Ingraham last night, then today on ABC, charging that the FBI and Obama administration shredded the Constitution.
Look, the probable cause, based on all the evidence that keeps dripping out and now has been further substantiated with the Friday, first memo, is that it was based on that dodgy dossier, which was, a political stunt.
The first one was very clean relative to sources and methods. My initial cut is this one is a lot less clean. But at the end of it all, it'll be guys like Rod Rosenstein, Chris Wray from FBI.
So you see the White House there with the chief of staff trying to include the FBI and the Justice Department to see what to redact from the Democrats' memo. Meanwhile, Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi today introduced a special resolution to disapprove of the Republican memo from Congressman Devin Nunes. It was voted down. Sarah Sanders, meanwhile, defended the president's claim that the first memo vindicates him, the press secretary saying it shows there has been, in her words, political bias in the Russia probe. Shannon?
All right, Ed Henry live with all the late-breaking details. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Let's bring in Fox News politics editor and author of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt. How are you tonight?
Living the dream. Living the brain.
Living the brain right now. We're
Right
glad
so.
to have you with
Right
us.
so.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. As all this is playing out, the memos back and forth, the White House now considering what to do with this. Do you think, as some do, that the Democrats have laid a trap for the president in this memo? It's a lot longer than the...